He looked too small for the courtroom bench, not because he was young, but because the room was never meant for someone like him. Tyler Brooks, 13 years old, sat on the edge of his seat, his feet not even touching the floor. His white button-up shirt sagged off his shoulders, the sleeves drooping past his wrists like a costume borrowed from a man twice his size. His tie hung crooked and loose, barely tied. He looked like a boy who had dressed himself in a hurry with no one to fix it for him. In the courtroom, that meant everything. The judge's name was Stanley Grant, 60-something, white, with deep-set eyes that rarely moved from his notes. He had a reputation in Ashford, quiet, firm, and tired of what he often called excuses. When Tyler's name was called, Judge Grant didn't even lift his gaze. He flicked his wrist impatiently. "Obstruction," he muttered. "At 13?" A pause. Then he looked up, eyes finally landing on the boy trembling in front of him. "That's what passes for fear these days?" he scoffed. The chuckle that followed was dry, short, but sharp enough to sting, the kind that cuts not because it's loud, but because everyone knows it's not supposed to be there. Tyler's shoulders sank as if the air had been knocked out of him. A low snicker escaped from someone seated in the back. The bailiff smirked. A chill seemed to ripple through the wood-paneled walls of the courtroom. Tyler blinked fast, trying to keep it together, trying not to let the tears fall. He lost. His eyes welled, and before he could stop himself, he was crying. Not loudly, not messily, just quietly, like someone ashamed to feel anything at all. I didn't mean to. His voice cracked like glass. Judge Grant raised a hand without looking at him. "Save it. If you want sympathy, go cry somewhere else." There was no lawyer beside Tyler, no advocate, no friendly face from the school. Not even the officer involved in the incident had bothered to show up. Just Tyler, alone, in a room designed to crush the spirit of grown men, let alone a boy still too young to ride a bike without a helmet. In the last row sat a woman in a navy suit. She looked official, back straight, arms crossed, face blank. Her name wasn't on any docket. She hadn't spoken a word, but she had been there from the beginning. Danielle Brooks, Tyler's mother. She didn't flinch when her son looked over his shoulder, his face pleading for someone to meet his eyes. She didn't blink when he broke into tears. Her gaze didn't move from the front. If you didn't know who she was, you'd assume she was just another bored, legal observer. But beneath her stillness was something more, a calculation, a control sharp as steel. She watched, measured, waited. Judge Grant flipped a page. "So," he said slowly, "you refuse to comply with a school officer's command. What command exactly?" Tyler wiped his nose on his sleeve, a gesture both childlike and heartbreaking. "He told me to stand, but I was tying my shoe." Grant leaned in. "And you refused?" I said, "1 second. I wasn't trying to be rude." The room went still. The silence wasn't respectful. It was dismissive, anticipatory, as if waiting for the judge's next line to be the punchline of a joke. Grant sighed. "You disrespected an officer. You escalated. Now you're here. Actions have consequences, son." "But I didn't do anything wrong." Tyler's voice found a little backbone, just enough to quiver with disbelief. His fists clenched by his sides. "I wasn't being mean. I just wanted to stay in class." Danielle's hand tightened around the strap of her purse, still seated, still silent. The judge removed his glasses, leaned back. "You think this courtroom is here for your feelings, young man? You think crying gets you out of responsibility?" Tyler tried to speak again, but the words caught. Judge Grant didn't wait. "If this is how boys are raised now," he said with disdain, "I weep for the next generation." The words hung in the air like smoke. No one spoke. No one breathed. Tyler sat down, his face buried in his hands, shoulders trembling. "And Danielle?" She didn't stand, she didn't sigh, but her eyes shifted ever so slightly, and if anyone had been watching closely, they might have noticed that something inside her had clicked into place. Near the jury box, a woman adjusted her coat. In the corner, A clerk pretended to type something, but all eyes kept sliding back to the boy. 13. Alone, and already learning that in some rooms, truth is the last thing that matters. The courtroom smelled of old wood and reheated coffee. But beneath that lingered something colder. A quiet injustice, too polite to shout, too constant to ignore. The judge's voice droned on. Tyler's charges were read aloud again, this time with emphasis. Obstruction, resisting, non-compliance. Each word chipped away at the truth. Still, Danielle did not move, didn't flinch. Her fingers tapped once, softly, against her knee, a code only she understood. Not yet, not now, because she hadn't come to this courtroom to intervene. She had come to watch them bury her son, just deep enough to think they'd gotten away with it. The courtroom resumed its rhythm, slow, impersonal, mechanical, like a machine oiled by indifference. A clerk scribbled something in her notes. The bailiff shifted weight from one foot to the other. Outside, leaves blew past the narrow courthouse windows, their golden edges pressing against the glass like they were trying to peek in. It was October in Ashford, school fundraiser season, football games, and potlucks. But inside this courtroom, there were no seasons, only verdicts. Judge Grant adjusted his robe and raised an eyebrow at Tyler. "So you told the officer 1 second, and he felt threatened." Tyler opened his mouth but hesitated. The question wasn't really a question. It was a trap. "I didn't raise my voice," he said softly. "I was just tying my shoe." Grant didn't reply. He just shook his head slowly, as if disappointed in the entire generation Tyler represented. He scribbled something in the margin of a form. "So now you're learning the cost of disobedience," he murmured. The air in the room thickened. No one objected. No one raised a hand to clarify, to speak on the boy's behalf. The absence of a defense attorney was glaring. The school hadn't sent a counselor, not even a form letter of context. Behind Tyler, Danielle sat perfectly still, but her presence felt heavier than ever, as if the room was tilting slightly toward her. The prosecutor, a man in a gray, forgettable suit, stood up and walked with exaggerated calm toward the front. "Your Honor," he began, "the school resource officer will testify shortly. But I think we all can agree that the issue here isn't just the incident. It's what it represents." Tyler tilted his head slightly, trying to follow. The prosecutor gestured toward him. "Early signs, Your Honor. Defiance, disrespect, disregard for authority. These patterns begin early." Tyler stared down at his scuffed shoes. One lace was still untied. "We have to ask ourselves," the prosecutor continued, "if we ignore this now, what kind of adult are we enabling?" The judge nodded slowly, thoughtfully, like the room had shifted from juvenile hearing to a forum on public danger. Danielle's eyes narrowed. Tyler's voice broke through again, barely. "I just wanted to finish class." Grant didn't look up. "You'll have time to think about that," he muttered. Then came the sound that landed like a final blow. The gavel, hard and unceremonious, not a declaration, a dismissal. The courtroom didn't cheer, didn't boo, it just moved on. Another clerk leaned in, whispering to the judge. The next case name was already being prepped. Tyler stood shakily, unsure if he was supposed to leave or stay. His eyes darted to his mother. She didn't move. Then just as he turned to step back, a door near the rear opened quietly. In walked a woman, a teacher by the look of her, pale, nervous, clutching her purse like it held the last scrap of courage she owned. Her blouse was neatly pressed, but her eyes were wild with hesitation. She approached the witness bench without being prompted. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Whitlow?" he asked, voice cordial. She nodded. "You're Tyler Brooks's homeroom teacher?" Another nod, barely audible. "Yes." "And you were present during the incident?" "Yes." He smiled like he already knew what she would say. "And what did you observe?" She looked at Tyler, just for a second, then at Judge Grant. I saw the student fail to comply with the officer's request. That was it. Clean, vague, safe. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. Thank you. No further questions. As she stepped down from the stand, her eyes landed on Danielle Brooks. Danielle didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't move, but Ms. Whitlow flinched anyway, because silence, when backed by truth, doesn't need to be loud. Outside the courtroom, a cold wind picked up. Leaves swirled along the steps. Somewhere, a clock tower rang. Afternoon was giving way to dusk, and in the back of the room, Danielle Brooks sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, still waiting, still calculating, still watching a courtroom show its true colors, one unchallenged sentence at a time. Tyler sat back down beside her, eyes red, hands shaking. He didn't look at her, she didn't look at him, but her fingers tapped once more, soft, deliberate. The game had begun. They just didn't know yet. They spoke of him like he wasn't in the room, like he was a threat, not a boy. The second day began without warning. No kind greeting, no acknowledgement that the accused was still just a middle schooler, just fluorescent lights humming overhead and the quiet shuffle of papers. Tyler Brooks sat stiffly in the same oversized shirt. His tie had been retied, a little tighter this time, but the sleeves still swallowed his hands. He looked smaller than yesterday, not physically but in presence, like the courtroom had already begun to shrink him. Danielle Brooks arrived early and sat in the exact same seat, back row, posture rigid, eyes unreadable. There was something unshakable about her stillness, like a monument people walk past but don't fully notice until it's too late. Judge Stanley Grant cleared his throat. We'll begin with testimony from the responding officer. Officer Scott Madsen took the stand with military precision, tall, angular, with a haircut that didn't allow for second chances. He placed both hands firmly on the rail and leaned slightly forward, as if already in control of the room. The subject, he began, referring to Tyler, displayed non-compliance with direct orders from a school authority. The term subject felt clinical, like Tyler was a lab result, a variable. Madsen continued. His body language was aggressive. He refused to rise when instructed. His tone was dismissive. Judge Grant raised an eyebrow. Aggressive in posture? Yes, Your Honor, Madsen said confidently. Shoulders tight, jaw clenched, eyes evasive. Tyler blinked, unsure whether to defend himself or just shrink further into the seat. The officer continued. Given the tension of the moment and my responsibility to maintain safety, I took the necessary steps to restrain him. Danielle's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes cooled a degree further. And in your professional opinion, the prosecutor asked, was the restraint justified? Yes, early intervention, Madsen replied, prevents escalation. In my experience, those who challenge authority young often develop more severe behavioral issues if unchecked. The courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't need to. The damage was in the tone, the subtext, the quiet message. This wasn't a scared kid. This was a future criminal. Tyler's fingers curled inward. The prosecutor paced slowly. Thank you, Officer Madsen. There was no cross-examination. Judge Grant glanced toward Tyler. Do you have anything to say? Tyler opened his mouth. That's not... The gavel tapped. You'll have your turn, the judge said flatly. But he wouldn't. Next came the video. Or what could have been the video. A short, grainy clip from a student's phone. It showed Tyler kneeling beside his desk, tying his shoe. A voice, his, saying, "Just 1 second, officer." Madsen stood over him, not responding. The clip showed the officer's hand reaching down, grabbing Tyler's arm. But before the video could play to the end, the prosecutor stood abruptly. Objection, Your Honor. The footage lacks proper chain of custody. It's from an unverified source and could be altered. Grant didn't hesitate. Sustained. Strike the video. Gone, just like that. The truth, dismissed on a technicality. Tyler looked around, eyes wide. But that was real, he whispered. No one responded. The prosecutor returned to center stage, voice calm and patronizing. He gestured to Tyler like a professor addressing a misbehaving child. "What we see here," he said, "is a young man unwilling to respect the structure around him, a refusal to comply, disrespect for authority. We must ask, if we ignore this now, what does it grow into?" Tyler gripped the edge of his chair. "I just wanted to stay in class," he said again, softer this time, his voice nearly lost in the silence. Judge Grant looked unmoved. "You don't speak unless asked." The room swallowed his words whole. The prosecutor's voice turned somber. "Your Honor, we recommend court-supervised detention, a short stay to emphasize accountability, for his sake and for society's." It was the way he said society that stung, like Tyler didn't belong to it. The judge leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Any final words, young man?" Tyler looked around the room. Still no lawyer, still no adult who looked like him or spoke for him. He looked down. "I just wanted to stay in class," he said again. It was all he had left. Behind him, Danielle didn't shift, but her finger tapped once against her purse. A signal, a countdown. Grant inhaled sharply, ready to deliver a verdict when the back door opened again with a soft creak. A woman entered the room slowly, blonde, neat, cautious. She looked like she didn't want to be there. It was Ms. Karen Whitlow. She walked like each step had weight, like the floor might collapse beneath her. Her blouse was perfectly ironed. Her face was not. She approached the witness stand with a tight grip on her purse. "Ms. Whitlow," the prosecutor said with artificial warmth, "thank you for coming." She nodded once. "You were present at the incident involving Tyler Brooks and Officer Madsen?" "Yes," she said. Her voice barely reached the microphone. "And what did you observe?" She hesitated. Too many seconds passed. "I saw. The student didn't leave the room when asked." "Did he raise his voice?" "He was. Frustrated," she answered carefully. "Threatening language?" She blinked. "Not exactly, but his tone was sharp." That was all she gave. Not a lie, not the truth. The prosecutor smiled. "No further questions." She stepped off the stand and began to walk back. But as she passed the back row, her eyes met Danielle's. There was no anger in Danielle's stare, no accusation, just observation, and Ms. Whitlow flinched, because she knew. That night, she didn't sleep. The ceiling fan spun slowly above her. Her thoughts did not. This wasn't the first time. 3 years ago, another student, another black boy, Elijah, accused of vaping in the bathroom. She'd seen him in the hallway at that exact time. She hadn't spoken up. Elijah was suspended. 2 weeks later, his mother found him in his room. He'd left a note. "They made me feel like nothing." She had buried that memory, moved on. But now, sitting in that courtroom, watching Tyler, a mirror of Elijah, something cracked. A whisper in her head. "You're not a fighter, but you're not blind either." She thought of Danielle's eyes, calm, relentless, like a truth too heavy to look at. Tyler's voice echoed in the room again and again. "I just wanted to stay in class." No one had answered him, not yet. But something in the air had changed. It wasn't loud, not yet. But it was moving. The courtroom didn't shift when she stood. It shifted when they realized who had been sitting all along. It began with a whisper, barely more than breath. "Isn't that Danielle Brooks?" The man who asked it sat in the second row, leaning toward his wife like he was about to share a secret he wasn't supposed to know. She turned sharply, eyes narrowing, scanning the back of the room. "You mean the Danielle Brooks?" He was already pulling out his phone. A quick search. DOJ Directory, photo, title, Deputy Director of Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Justice. The silence snapped. Not loud, not sudden, but perceptible. Like when a storm is too close to hear thunder. Only the pressure changes, and your lungs know before your ears do. Bench by bench, heads turned. Danielle Brooks sat as she had for the past 2 days, unmoving, unreadable, composed. But she no longer blended in. She no longer could. People began murmuring. Was she really his mother? Why hadn't she said anything? Why wasn't there a lawyer? The questions swirled faster than anyone could answer them. Even Judge Grant shifted in his seat, straightening his back like he suddenly remembered the cameras might be watching. He cleared his throat twice. His gavel hand hovered, unsure. Officer Scott Madsen glanced toward the prosecution table, uneasy. He leaned toward the prosecutor, whispering something urgent. The prosecutor nodded, but didn't look so confident anymore. Danielle didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her presence was no longer a mystery. It was a warning. Tyler turned slightly in his chair, eyes wide, unsure. His face still showed the remnants of crying, red rims, puffed cheeks. But now there was something else in his eyes. He was looking for a signal. Danielle met his gaze and gave him a single, slow nod. It wasn't warm. It wasn't motherly. It was strong, intentional, solid, and Tyler understood. He faced forward again, straighter, not stronger maybe, but steadier. The silence inside the courtroom didn't stay within the walls. Someone had uploaded a clip, just 38 seconds. Tyler crying, the judge smirking. The line, "That's what passes for fear these days." It hit a niche civil rights forum first. Then it found Twitter, then Reddit, then the inbox of a local news editor. The top comment read, "If this is how they treat a kid, what happens when the cameras are off?" A second clip followed, a still image of Danielle in the back row. Sharp focus, cold expression. The caption didn't need to be clever. It just said, "She watched and waited." The courtroom wasn't anonymous anymore. Inside, the judge called for a recess, but his voice cracked slightly when he said, 10-minute break. The gavel fell heavier than before. People began to shuffle out, but they glanced at Danielle again, deliberately. Officer Madsen walked past her aisle, his jaw tight, his stride stiffer than before. She didn't look at him, didn't blink. She just waited. In the hallway, a woman turned to Danielle and whispered, "Why aren't you saying anything?" Danielle looked at her calmly, eyes sharp but calm. "Sometimes the system needs to reveal itself before you take it down." The woman blinked, didn't ask again, and in that moment the silence wasn't passive. It was power. Because Danielle Brooks hadn't come to make noise. She had come to measure the full depth of the rot before tearing it up by the root. Down the hall, Eli Martinez sat alone in a storage office-turned-clerk's nook, staring at a folder of transcripts. He wasn't supposed to interfere. He wasn't supposed to feel anything. But Tyler's voice had pierced through layers of routine like a nail through soft wood. Eli thought of his little brother. Same age, same stubborn streak. He copied everything, transcripts, notes, hearing logs, and compressed them into a file. Then he clicked send. The recipient, Equal Eye. A watchdog group feared by most court districts, respected by even more. No one saw him do it, but that one click echoed louder than anything spoken aloud that day. Back inside the courtroom, Judge Grant was pacing slightly, no longer in control. The whispers had grown legs. Every phone pointed at him now felt like a threat. Every glance a loaded question. Then came the buzz. Equal Eye had received the file and posted a statement. An investigation was underway. Danielle still hadn't stood, but the ground was already shifting. Meanwhile, Ms. Karen Whitlow sat in the break room, untouched coffee going cold in her hand. Her phone vibrated. She didn't need to look. She knew. Clarissa Brooks, DOJ, Tyler's mother. A wave of guilt washed over her, heavier than before, more complete. The hallway felt longer now, her heels clacking louder than normal as she walked, hurried, toward the exit where Danielle stood alone. Danielle didn't turn. She didn't need to. "I should have said something," Karen blurted, breathless. Danielle waited. "I saw what Madsen did. I didn't stop him." Still no reply. "I had a student, Marcus, years ago. Same story. He didn't make it." Danielle's eyes softened, slightly. "I can't keep being silent." Danielle turned fully now, looked her in the eye. "Then don't." That was all. But it was enough. Ms. Whitlow turned and walked back toward the courtroom. This time, her steps weren't hesitant. Back in chambers, Judge Grant was reviewing damage control with his clerk. They were losing the narrative. Then came the ping. Another media alert. DOJ official witnesses alleged misconduct in juvenile court. His hands trembled slightly as he rubbed his forehead. And still, Danielle sat in her same seat, still watching, still waiting. The next session would begin in minutes, but this time, the courtroom wouldn't just be a room. It would be a stage. It wasn't a rallying cry that sparked the shift. It was one teacher's trembling voice. By the time the courtroom reconvened, the silence had changed. It wasn't the heavy, indifferent kind from before. This one buzzed, charged, like static before a storm. Tyler Brooks sat in the same seat, but his posture had changed, just slightly. His shoulders didn't slump quite as low. His gaze didn't wander as aimlessly. He wasn't calm, but he wasn't invisible anymore either. Danielle Brooks returned to her seat, still in the last row. The same navy suit, the same controlled expression. But now, everyone knew who she was. And that changed everything. There were more people in the room now. Some sat in the aisles, some stood along the walls, phones hidden but ready. A few journalists from local outlets had quietly filed in during the recess. No cameras, not yet. But their presence spoke louder than any lens. Judge Grant took his seat, noticeably straighter than usual. His gavel dropped softly, as if unsure of its own authority. "We'll resume the hearing," he said, voice cautious. Before the prosecution could begin, a movement caught everyone's attention. Ms. Karen Whitlow rose from the audience. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait to be called. She walked straight to the front of the courtroom and stood near the witness stand. The prosecutor looked confused. "Ms. Whitlow, is there something—" "I have something to add to my testimony," she said, louder than anyone expected. Gasps, small ones, but real. Judge Grant leaned forward. "You've already testified." She nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, but I left something out, and I need to correct the record." There was a pause. The kind of pause that doesn't just fill silence, it rewrites it. "You may proceed," the judge said, wary. Karen looked directly at Tyler. "I was there that day, and Tyler Brooks did not threaten anyone. He wasn't disrespectful. He wasn't defiant. He was tying his shoe, and I saw it. I saw everything." She turned back to the judge, her voice wavering but unshakable. "I didn't say it earlier because I was afraid, but I can't keep being afraid." The prosecutor objected, something about improper procedure, about narrative bias. But no one was listening anymore, because Ms. Whitlow had just done what no one else had. She had broken the silence. Not for sympathy, for truth. The judge looked like he might object too, but the words never came. Behind Karen, Danielle's eyes didn't soften. They focused. A quiet shift rolled through the room, the kind that doesn't shout but settles deep into people's ribs, the kind that whispers, "Things are changing." The rest of the session passed in fragments. Judge Grant ordered a pause in sentencing, a request for further review, procedural, formal. But it meant one thing: Tyler wouldn't be detained today. Instead, the court approved a transfer to a hospital for overnight observation. No holding cell, just rest. When the ruling was read, Tyler didn't smile, but he exhaled, slowly, fully. Danielle closed her eyes once, a moment, then reopened them. Outside the courthouse, it had started to rain, a light drizzle, the kind that dusted windshields but didn't wash away much. Inside, someone whispered, "She did it." But it wasn't Danielle they meant. It was Karen, because sometimes the loudest moment comes from the quietest voice. That evening, Tyler lay in a clean hospital bed, not because he was sick, but because for the first time since the arrest, someone decided he deserved comfort. The IV wasn't running. The monitors beeped only once every so often. He hadn't spoken since the hearing ended. Danielle sat beside him, a file folder in her lap. She looked down at the paper inside, an old photo creased at the edges. A boy, 17, eyes bright, smile quick. Her brother, Tyler's uncle. She turned the photo toward him. "This was Terrence," she said quietly. Tyler glanced at it, then away. Danielle kept her voice even. "He wanted to be an architect, told me once he'd design a building that kissed the clouds." She let that linger, but he never got the chance. Tyler didn't ask what happened. He already knew. Danielle continued. "He was arrested at 17. Wrong place, wrong skin. They said he fit a description." She swallowed. Her voice grew tighter. "He wasn't even on the same side of town. There was video, but it disappeared, just like your footage." Tyler turned his head slightly. Danielle's eyes didn't flinch. "He got 10 years. My mama spent herself trying to fight it. Wrote letters, showed up to hearings. No one listened because she was just a poor black woman from Baton Rouge." She leaned in. "He lasted 3 years. Then he didn't." Tyler blinked, slowly. A silence stretched between them. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't empty. It was old, shared, heavy. Then finally he asked the question he had been carrying since the moment this all began. "Why didn't you stop them earlier, Mama? When they yelled at me, when they made me look like I was something bad?" Danielle looked away, not from shame, but from pain too long carried. "I wanted to," she said. "God, I wanted to tear that courtroom down." She stood, walked to the window, then returned. "But I needed to know if the system I've spent 25 years working inside could stand on its own." She looked him in the eye. "Because if it can't, then everything I've fought for was never real." Tyler was silent. Danielle sat again, this time closer. "I needed them to show their true colors. On the record, I needed people to see what happens when no one speaks up. I needed to break the silence, the way it broke your uncle." She reached for his hand. This time he didn't pull away, and in that simple human touch, there was no DOJ badge, no courtroom, no statement, just a mother and her son, and the beginning of something neither of them had words for yet. By sunrise, the hospital room was still. Machines beeped quietly. Rain tapped at the windows like someone outside was trying to whisper instead of knock. Tyler hadn't said much since the night before, but his eyes were different. Clearer, less afraid, still wounded, but not hollow. Danielle sat beside him, a tablet open in her lap, screen dimmed. She had declined every interview request, morning shows, radio calls, podcasts. Even a documentary crew had emailed twice. She ignored them all. Instead, she was writing something else. A proposal. Town-wide review of juvenile court practices. Not a headline. Just work. That was who she was. At the same time, someone else was doing work of a different kind. In a coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse, Earl Whitman stood in line, a manila envelope tucked under his arm like it was made of glass. He'd held onto it for nearly 20 years. Inside, photos, paperwork, a dashcam freeze frame, a report that was never filed. Earl had been arrested in 2005 during a traffic stop, said he resisted, said he cursed, said he matched a description. He never did. He kept the photos. Not because he wanted to, but because nobody believed him, not then, not the press, not his old church friends, not even his own brother. He handed the envelope to a woman behind the counter, a city hall clerk meeting him there off the books. "This town's hidden too much for too long," Earl said. The next day, 2 more men stepped forward, then a woman, then a teacher. Stories trickled in, some old, some recent, but all pointing in one direction. Silence had protected the system, but not anymore. At St. Mark's Chapel, Ms. Whitlow stood behind a plastic folding table, hands trembling, voice low. She wasn't lecturing. She was confessing. "I stood quiet once," she said. "I watched a child suffer. I won't do that again." In front of her sat 12 students, black, brown, and white, half of them still wearing backpacks. Their eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a hunger to understand. A girl raised her hand. "Can you teach us how to speak up without getting hurt?" Ms. Whitlow nodded. "That's why we're here." From the back pews, a father wiped a tear. A retired principal leaned forward. This wasn't a rally. It was a beginning. That Sunday evening, Reverend Monroe took the pulpit, hands weathered, voice clear. "I've seen laws upheld by fear," he said. "But this week, I saw justice held by love." No shouts, no chants, just a room full of people nodding, some crying, some standing. Across town, Danielle sat in her home office surrounded by untouched press packets. Her inbox was a mess, a CNN producer, an op-ed request from The Atlantic, book deals, panel invites. She declined them all. Instead, she sent her proposal to 3 local leaders. Then she picked up her phone, texted one person, "Let's get to work." Meanwhile, a 38-second clip of Tyler crying resurfaced online, now paired with the moment Danielle revealed her badge. It hit harder the second time, because now people knew the full story, and they couldn't unsee it. The hashtag spread again, #StandWithTyler. Then, not what they said. And with it came voices. A teacher in Georgia tweeted, "This could have been my student." A mother in Chicago, "This was my son." A teenager in Oakland, "They called me aggressive. I was just tired." By midweek, 3 community leaders had signed Danielle's proposal. A town hall was scheduled. People couldn't pretend anymore. Not after what they'd seen. Not after what Tyler had survived. Publicly, quietly, fully. Back at school, students talked in hushed tones. Some teachers avoided eye contact. Others looked at Danielle differently in the parking lot. Not cold, but cautious, like they knew she wasn't just a parent anymore. She was the mirror now, and nobody likes looking too long. Tyler didn't return to school right away. Instead, he started writing. It began with a single blog post, black text, white background, no ads, no comments. He titled it, "The Silence I Broke." Within a week, stories started pouring in from across the country. I was told I asked too many questions. They searched my locker for speaking too loud. My tone was called threatening. I was asking where the homework was. By the end of the first month, the blog had over 800,000 visits. By the end of the second, it was archived by the Library of Congress. Tyler didn't smile at that. He just kept writing. And Danielle, she kept showing up, not as a keynote speaker, not as a symbol, just as a woman who refused to let the system rebuild itself in silence. One Thursday evening, 6 months later, the courthouse opened its doors again, not for sentencing, for progress. Inside, Danielle and Tyler stepped forward. He was taller now, or maybe just clearer. He carried a small folder. Inside, a printed version of his blog's first post. He handed it to the new judge, quietly. Just a reminder. They didn't give speeches. They didn't stay long. But as they walked back down the steps, the sun caught their backs. No camera flashes, no chants, no hashtags. Just the sound of gravel underfoot. Just a mother and her son, moving forward, together. The auditorium lights were blinding, not warm, not golden, just harsh, white, direct. Tyler Brooks stood backstage, fingers twitching at his side. His palms were damp, his mouth dry. The program had his name listed as closing youth speaker. Just 7 minutes, but the silence on the other side of the curtain felt endless. He could hear murmurs, footsteps, a shifting sea of bodies settling into their seats. Then the voice came over the intercom. "You're on in 30 seconds. He swallowed hard. Danielle stood behind him, hands folded. She didn't say much, just gave him a nod, the same kind of nod she gave him in court. It wasn't permission. It was belief. The curtain parted, and Tyler walked out. Not with confidence, with weight. The kind of weight a boy shouldn't have to carry. But he carried it anyway. The room stilled. He looked small behind the podium. He was small, still only 14, still scared, still healing. But when he spoke, the air changed. "My name is Tyler Brooks," he said, "and I need you to hear me. Not read about me, not assume me. Hear me." A pause. "I'm not what they said I was. I never was." The auditorium leaned in. "They said I was aggressive because I raised my hand. They said I was defiant because I asked why. They said I was dangerous because I didn't smile when they accused me." He stopped, breathed. "When all I wanted was to stay in class." No sound. Even the phone's recording seemed quieter. They dragged me out in handcuffs. Like a warning to everyone who looked like me, talked like me, existed like me. His fists clenched, not from rage, from focus. They expected me to believe them. They expected me to stay quiet. But I won't. Not anymore. From stage left, a woman whispered, "My God." A senator in the second row stood silently. Then a principal. Then a teen girl in a hoodie that read, "Silence is not protection." One by one, the room rose. Not clapping, just standing. A presence, not a performance. And Tyler kept going. "I speak today because I still can. But not everyone got that chance." He turned toward the screen behind him. A photo appeared. A young black man in a graduation cap, bright smile, proud eyes. My uncle, Terrence. He died behind bars because no one listened. The room held its breath. But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. Applause erupted, but he wasn't done. He raised a hand. The room quieted. "I don't want your pity. I don't need saving. I just want truth. I want kids like me to be seen as students, not suspects." He looked down once, then back up. "And if someone had asked me back in that courtroom what I really wanted," a long pause, "I would have said, 'Can I please go back to math class now?'" The crowd broke, not with noise, but with emotion, tears, applause, a few sobs from the back row. The hashtag #NotWhatTheySaid trended before he left the stage. In New York, a teacher paused her class to stream the moment. In Phoenix, a boy sitting alone at lunch wrote, "Because of you, Tyler, I told my teacher she was wrong today, and she listened." Tyler walked off stage into Danielle's arms. She didn't say, "I'm proud of you." She just held him, because there were no more headlines needed, no more hashtags, no more evidence. The boy who had once been silenced had just made the world listen. Sometimes the quietest voice leaves the loudest echo. Watching young Tyler stand beneath those unforgiving lights, eyes steady, hands calm, was like seeing a page turn in real time. Not because the noise stopped, but because something deeper started. A shift, not just in one courtroom, but in the way people looked at boys who had been told for too long to sit down and stay silent. This story wasn't about a perfect ending. It was about the quiet strength it takes to keep your dignity when the world tries to strip it away. About a mother who chose patience over performance, wisdom over noise. And about a boy from the Black community who reminded all of us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands. Each chapter, from the silent glances to the whispered confessions, became a thread in something larger. The realization that the Black community doesn't need saving. It needs space, respect, and truth to be seen clearly. The lesson is simple, but not small. Don't judge a child, or anyone, by the noise others make around them. Because sometimes the person we ignore, the voice we brush off, carries the truth we've been too afraid to hear. Justice doesn't always come wrapped in grand speeches or headlines. Sometimes it shows up in a second-hand shirt, trembling hands, and a voice that says, "I just wanted to stay in class." Like a quiet lamp in a dark window, even the smallest flicker of truth can help guide an entire town through the fog. Across decades, the Black community has carried the weight of being misunderstood and misjudged, not because they lacked value, but because too many refused to look beyond the surface. Tyler's story is a reminder. Every time someone chooses to stand, to listen, to speak with care rather than volume, we stitch something new into the American fabric, something stronger. So maybe tonight, as you sit with this story still humming in the back of your mind, ask yourself, who in your life might be quietly asking to be seen, to be heard without judgment? If this story touched your heart, consider sharing it, not for attention, but as a small gesture of warmth towards someone in your own community who may feel invisible. Sometimes the stories we pass along become the mirrors others finally dare to look into. And if you ever find yourself wondering whether kindness matters, remember this: the system blinked, but it was love, quiet and unwavering, that made it look again.